The blood hadn't even dried on the marble floor when Alara Ashford heard her own death being announced to the gathering below, her name stripped from the family registry as if she'd never drawn breath, while she stood frozen in the gallery shadows watching her stepmother smile. And that's when the ancient vampire lord stepped through the ballroom doors, his silver eyes locking onto hers through the darkness, and spoke 3 words that shattered the night. "There you are." Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The chandeliers blazed with 1,000 candles in the Ashford Manor's grand ballroom, their light catching on silk gowns and jeweled throats, on champagne flutes raised in toast to a family that had just committed murder without spilling a single drop. Ilara's fingers clutched the gallery railing, her knuckles white against the dark wood, her heart hammering so violently she was certain everyone below could hear it. But they couldn't hear anything over Lady Constance Ashford's carefully modulated voice as she addressed the cream of London society, explaining with practiced sorrow how dear Ilara had succumbed to a sudden illness, how the family had been devastated, how they would honor her memory even as they moved forward with the necessary arrangements. The estate that should have been Ilara's, the inheritance her father had left her before his own mysterious death 6 months prior. Ilara had been 16 when her mother died, 20 when her father remarried, 21 when he died, and now, at 22, she was apparently dead, though she could still feel her pulse racing, could still taste the bitter dregs of the tea that had nearly killed her 3 hours ago. She vomited it up in the rose garden, had stumbled through the servants' passages to her rooms, had packed a single bag before the terrible understanding crashed over her. There was nowhere to go, no relatives who would believe her over Constance, no friends who wouldn't have attended this very gathering, who wouldn't already be mourning the convenient fiction of her demise. The vampire hadn't taken his eyes off her. He stood amid the glittering crowd like a wolf among sheep, tall and impossibly still, wearing black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His hair was dark as a moonless night, pulled back to reveal a face of such severe beauty that it seemed carved from ice and cruelty. But it was his eyes that held her, silver, not gray, actually silver, like mercury, like moonlight made solid. And they saw her. Through the shadows of the gallery, through the careful architecture of her disappearance, through every wall her family had tried to build around her erasure. Ilara's breath caught as he began moving through the crowd, not toward the stairs, toward the space directly below where she stood, as if he could walk through air itself to reach her. People parted for him without seeming to notice they were doing so, conversations faltering and resuming in his wake like water around a stone. "The reading of the modified will shall take place tomorrow," Constance was saying, her hand resting possessively on the arm of Ilara's cousin, Marcus, who wore mourning black and an expression of poorly concealed triumph. "We appreciate your understanding during this difficult time. Ilara would have wanted us to celebrate her life, not dwell in sorrow. Ilara would have wanted to push Constance down the marble stairs." The vampire stopped directly below the gallery, his head tilting back, his gaze finding hers again with the precision of an arrow finding its target. His lips moved, forming words only she could hear, though she couldn't understand how that was possible across the distance and through the din of meaningless condolences below. "Come down." She shook her head fractionally. Going down meant being seen. Being seen meant being caught. Being caught meant whatever Constance had planned for her if the poison hadn't worked, and Alara had no illusions it would be quick or kind. "Come down," he said again, and this time she heard it inside her mind, resonating in her bones, or I'll come up, and your family will learn exactly what they've invited into their home tonight. The threat, or promise, in those words made her move before conscious thought could intervene. Her feet carried her along the gallery to the servants' stairs, down through passages she'd known since childhood, emerging behind a tapestry near the ballroom's west entrance. She'd meant to run the moment she reached the ground floor, to flee into the London night and disappear into the labyrinth of streets she'd studied from her window during years of genteel imprisonment. But he was there, somehow, waiting in the narrow space behind the tapestry, close enough that she could see her reflection in his silver eyes, could smell something like winter storms and old stone. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone who's been looking for you for a very long time." His voice was cultured, ancient, carrying accents she couldn't place. British, certainly, but underneath that lay something older, something that predated the England she knew. "Though I confess, I didn't expect to find you being erased from existence by your own blood." "They're not my blood," Alara said automatically. "My father was murdered." The vampire said it without inflection, a simple statement of fact. "As you nearly were tonight. The tea, yes. Nightshade and something else, something alchemical. They're not taking chances with you." Ilara's hand went to her throat where her pulse still felt wrong, too fast and then too slow. "How do you know that?" "Because I can smell it in your blood. And because I know what you are, Ilara Ashford." He leaned closer, and she realized with a shock of cold understanding that she wasn't afraid. She should have been terrified, alone with a creature that shouldn't exist, a monster from children's tales and Gothic novels. Instead, she felt something like recognition, as if she'd been waiting for this moment without knowing it. "What I am," she echoed. "The last of the Ashford line." His hand moved, not touching her, but gesturing to encompass everything. The manner, the title, the blood that ran through her veins. The true line. The one that made a covenant with my kind 300 years ago, when your ancestors saved my father's life and earned a debt that has passed down through generations. Ilara stared at him. That's impossible. Most impossible things are simply forgotten truths. He tilted his head, listening to something she couldn't hear. "They're looking for you. Your stepmother has realized you're not in your rooms. She sent servants to search." "I have to leave." Ilara moved to step past him, but his hand shot out, catching her wrist with impossible speed. His skin was cool, not cold, like marble that had rested in shadow. "Leave to where? With what resources? How long do you think you'll survive out there? A young woman alone with no money, no connections, and half a dose of alchemical poison still working through your system?" His grip didn't hurt, but it was immovable. "Your family has already buried you in the eyes of society. By morning, every door in London will be closed to you." "Then what do you suggest?" Ilara's voice came out sharper than intended, edged with the hysteria she'd been holding back since she'd woken choking on her own bile in the garden. "That I go back? Let them finish what they started?" "I suggest," the vampire said, his silver eyes boring into hers, "that you stop running from your enemies and start using the weapons you don't yet know you possess." He released her wrist, but she didn't move. "Your father knew what you were. He spent years hiding it, protecting you from those who would use you or destroy you. But he's gone now, and you're alone. And your stepmother has brought in an alchemist to ensure you die before you can awaken. Awaken to what? To the power in your blood. The covenant didn't just bind my family to yours, Ilara. It changed your line at the most fundamental level. You carry something in your veins that hasn't manifested in 3 generations. He stepped back, giving her space, though his attention remained fixed on her with predatory focus. You're a catalyst. In the presence of vampire blood, your own blood transforms, grants abilities that make you invaluable or incredibly dangerous, depending on one's perspective. Ilara's mind raced, trying to reconcile this impossible information with everything she thought she knew. You're saying I'm some kind of weapon? I'm saying you're powerful, and right now you're hunted. He glanced toward the ballroom, where the sounds of the gathering continued, oblivious. Your stepmother discovered your father's journals after his death. She learned what you are, what you could become. That's why she moved so quickly to remarry your father, to position herself to inherit. That's why she's trying to erase you, so she can take everything. It wasn't a question. The pieces fell together with horrible clarity. The rushed marriage, her father's sudden decline, the careful isolation Ilara had endured this past year as Constance slowly severed every connection she had to the outside world. Everything but what matters most. The vampire's expression shifted, something almost like regret crossing his features. She doesn't understand that the covenant can't be transferred. The debt belongs to you, and through you, to me. Your death doesn't free her, it damns us both. How convenient for you to show up now, Ilara, said, anger finally cutting through the shock. Where were you when my father was dying? Where were you when I needed? I was bound. The words came out harsh, final. An ancient binding placed on me by witch hunters a century ago, keeping me imprisoned beneath the earth while they searched for something I refused to give them. I broke free 3 months ago, too late to save your father, but apparently just in time for you. He moved to the edge of the tapestry, peering out into the corridor beyond. They're coming, the servants, armed, I suspect, with more than just questions. Ilara heard it then, footsteps, multiple sets, and the low murmur of urgent voices. Her breath came faster, the edges of panic creeping in. What do you want from me? Nothing you're not willing to give. He turned back, extending his hand. But if you want to survive the night, if you want to reclaim what's yours and make your family answer for what they've done, you'll need to trust me. Just for now. Just until we're somewhere safe. And then, Ilara Ashford, we wake up what's sleeping in your blood. And we remind London why the old covenants were made. His hand remained steady, waiting. Or you can run, and I can guarantee you'll be dead before dawn. Your choice. It wasn't a choice at all, really. Ilara took his hand. The world lurched. One moment she was standing in the narrow space behind the tapestry. The next she was outside, the cool London night air hitting her face like a slap. They stood in the manor's garden, near the fountain where she'd vomited up the poisoned tea, and she realized with a sick lurch that she had no memory of moving, of crossing the distance, of anything but the sensation of falling through darkness. What did you... Later. The vampire released her hand and strode toward the garden's far wall, where shadows pooled so thickly they seemed solid. Can you climb? Ilara gathered her skirts, relief flooding through her that she'd changed from her evening gown into traveling clothes before hiding in the gallery. Yes. Then move. She scaled the wall with him, dropping into the alley beyond, just as shouts erupted from the manor behind them. Torches blazed to life in windows. The hunt had begun. They ran through London's nighttime streets, her companion moving with inhuman grace and speed, never quite running so fast that she couldn't keep pace, but always testing the edges of her endurance. He led her through passages she'd never seen, beneath bridges where the Thames whispered ancient secrets, through the territories that belonged to the London most people pretended didn't exist. Finally, when her lungs burned and her legs trembled, they stopped before an old townhouse in a district she didn't recognize. The building looked abandoned, windows dark, iron fence rusted, and gate hanging askew. "This is your safe place?" Ilara asked between gasps for air. Appearances are often deceiving. He pushed the gate open, and she saw the rust was an illusion. Fresh metal gleamed beneath theatrical corrosion. Welcome to one of the oldest vampire sanctuaries in London. Under Covenant law, your stepmother's people can't touch you here. Covenant law? Ilara followed him up the steps to the door, which opened before he touched it, revealing an interior that contradicted everything the exterior promised. Rich carpets, gas lamps burning with steady light, furniture that spoke of wealth and careful taste. How much don't I know about the world? Everything important. He closed the door behind them, and she heard locks engaging, multiple locks, heavy and solid. But you'll learn. You have to, if you're going to survive what comes next. A woman appeared from a side room, small and elderly, with iron-gray hair and eyes that held the same silver sheen as the vampires. She looked Ilara up and down with an expression that managed to be both assessing and compassionate. "So this is the lost Ashford girl," she said, her voice carrying a Welsh lilt. "Half dead and wholly desperate. You certainly know how to make an entrance, Theron." "This is Mrs. Blackwell," Theron said, and Ilara filed away his name, turning it over in her mind. Theron. It fit him somehow. Ancient, powerful, sharp. She manages this sanctuary. You can trust her. "Trust is earned, not declared," Mrs. Blackwell said, but her expression softened marginally as she looked at Ilara. "Though you look like you could use a bath, a meal, and about 12 hours of sleep before we discuss anything as complicated as trust. Come along, girl." Ilara glanced at Theron, who nodded. "Go, rest. We'll talk in the morning about what happens next." "You mean you'll tell me what you expect in exchange for saving me tonight?" Ilara said. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, among other things. "But first, you need to not die from the poison still in your system. Mrs. Blackwell has the antidote." The old woman snorted. "Calling it an antidote is generous. It's more of a convince your body not to shut down tonic. Tastes like the devil's bathwater, but it'll keep you alive." She gestured impatiently. "Well, are you coming, or do you want to stand there testing my patience while your organs decide whether to function?" Ilara followed Mrs. Blackwell up a narrow staircase, to a room that, despite its location in what appeared to be a vampire sanctuary, looked remarkably normal. A bed with clean linens, a wash basin, a wardrobe, and a window overlooking a garden that definitely hadn't been visible from the street. "Drink this first." Mrs. Blackwell produced a vial from her apron pocket, handing it to Ilara. "All of it, mind you. Don't sip like it's tea at the Savoy." The liquid inside looked like liquid tar and smelled worse. Ilara unstoppered it and downed it in 3 swallows, fighting the urge to gag. Heat spread through her chest, then turned cold, then hot again, as if her blood couldn't decide what temperature it wanted to be. "Good girl." Mrs. Blackwell took the empty vial back. "That'll fight off the worst of what they gave you, but you'll feel rough for a few days yet. Your father's wife used a nasty bit of alchemy, part poison, part curse. It was meant to stop your heart and make it look like natural causes." She busied herself laying out towels and a nightdress. Lucky for you, Theron's been searching for you since he got free. Otherwise, you'd be as dead as your family claims. Why was he searching for me? Ilara sank onto the bed, exhaustion crashing over her now that the immediate danger had passed. He mentioned a covenant, but you don't believe in old magic and older debts? Mrs. Blackwell's expression was knowing. You will. You'll have to, living in this world now. The covenant between your family and Theron's line is blood deep, girl. It can't be broken, can't be transferred, can't be ignored. You're bound to him as surely as he's bound to you. I didn't agree to any binding. Your ancestor did, and some agreements don't need renewal. The old woman moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. Your father spent his life trying to keep you away from this world. Can't say I blame him. It's dangerous, full of creatures that would use you or destroy you depending on their needs. But he's gone, and the world doesn't care about his wishes anymore. You're here now, and you'll need to decide what kind of power you want to be. I don't want power, Ilara said. I want my life back. Those might be the same thing. Mrs. Blackwell stepped into the hallway. Bath is through that door. Food will be up shortly. And girl? She looked back, her silver eyes catching the lamplight. Whatever else happens, you're safe here tonight. So, rest. The reckoning can wait until morning. The door closed, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that everything she'd believed about her world, her family, and herself had been a carefully constructed lie. She moved to the window, looking out over the impossible garden, and tried to reconcile the girl who'd woken that morning expecting nothing more dramatic than another day of genteel imprisonment with the woman who'd just discovered she was part of an ancient covenant with vampires. Below, in the garden, she saw Theron standing among the night-blooming flowers, his face tilted toward her window as if he could feel her watching. Their eyes met across the distance, and she felt it again, that sense of recognition, of puzzle pieces sliding into place, of a story that had been waiting centuries to continue. She touched her hand to the glass, and he raised his in response. Not a wave, but an acknowledgement, a promise, perhaps, or a warning. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought only questions and the terrifying freedom of a life suddenly, violently unmoored from everything she'd known. Ilara turned from the window and went to draw her bath, trying not to think about what the water might wash away and what might remain. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through curtains that were definitely thicker than they appeared, casting the room in a perpetual twilight. Ilara woke disoriented, reaching for the familiar weight of her mother's locket before remembering she'd left it behind in her hasty flight. The loss felt like another small death, another erasure. She dressed in the clothes laid out at the foot of her bed, simple but well made, a day dress in deep burgundy that fit as if tailored for her. Someone had taken her measurements, or had them, which raised questions she wasn't certain she wanted answered. Mrs. Blackwell found her in the hallway, looking lost. Breakfast is in the morning room. Third door on the left, down the stairs. Theron's waiting. Does he eat? Ilara asked before she could stop herself. Regular food, I mean. He can, though he doesn't need to. Mostly does it to put humans at ease. The old woman's expression turned sly. You'll learn to read what he needs and doesn't need. The bond sees to that. There's that word again, bond. Ilara descended the stairs carefully, her body still aching from the previous night's exertions and the poison working its way out of her system. Everyone keeps mentioning it like I should understand, but my father never. Your father was a good man trying to protect you from a fate he didn't choose for himself either. Mrs. Blackwell's voice softened. He loved your mother deeply, and when he learned what carrying the covenant would mean for you, he tried to find a way out. Spent years researching, consulting scholars and witches and anyone who might know how to break an unbreakable binding. Did he find anything? Nothing that didn't involve your death or Theron's, and neither was an acceptable option. They'd reached the morning room, where light streamed through windows that definitely shouldn't have existed in the abandoned house she'd seen from outside. Theron sat at a table laden with food, bread, butter, jam, cold meats, fruits, things that made Ilara's stomach growl despite the surreal circumstances. He stood when she entered, a gesture of courtesy from another century. "You look better." The tonic worked. "I look like someone who nearly died and then got dragged through London by a vampire," Ilara said, but she moved to the table and sat, unable to resist the pull of the food. "But yes, I feel marginally less like death." "High praise indeed." He waited until she'd served herself before sitting again. "We need to discuss what happens next. I need to know what's real." Ilara met his gaze directly, refusing to look away despite the intensity of those silver eyes. "There's a covenant, a bond, but my father never mentioned anything. He told me stories, taught me history, but nothing about vampires or ancient deaths or blood magic. He was protecting you. What you don't know can't be tortured out of you." Theron's expression darkened. "And there are those who would do exactly that to learn what your bloodline holds." "Then explain it to me now, all of it." Ilara broke a piece of bread, forcing herself to eat despite her churning stomach. "I deserve to know what I'm caught up in." Theron leaned back, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. 300 years ago, my father was betrayed by his own kind during a vampire civil war that nearly destroyed both our species and humanity. He was wounded, dying, in a way that even vampire blood couldn't heal, a curse laid by an ancient witch who wanted to see our entire line ended. Your ancestor, Thomas Ashford, found him in the ruins of what would become this house. "And saved him?" Ilara guessed. "More than that. Thomas was a scholar, a dabbler in natural philosophy and alchemy. He recognized what my father was, and instead of finishing him, offered a bargain. His knowledge for my father's life. Thomas had discovered something, you see, a way to synthesize vampire regeneration with human blood, creating a compound that could heal almost any wound, cure almost any disease." "That's impossible. So is me sitting here talking to you, yet here we are." Theron's smile held no humor. "Thomas succeeded, but the process required both vampire blood and what he called a catalyst, a human whose blood had certain rare properties. He used his own blood to save my father, and in doing so, changed his bloodline forever. The catalyst property passed to his children, and theirs down through the generations to you." Ilara set down her bread, appetite vanishing. "So, I'm—" "What? A walking chemical formula? You're a person whose blood, when combined with vampire blood in the correct proportions and circumstances, can create something unprecedented. Healing, enhanced abilities, extended life. The possibilities are vast. Which is why my family has guarded yours for 3 centuries, and why others would kill to control you. My stepmother, among others. She hired an alchemist, a human who studied forbidden texts and knows just enough to be dangerous. When she found your father's journals, she realized what she had. Not just an estate and a fortune, but the key to something much more valuable." Theron's hands rested flat on the table, perfectly still. "She was planning to auction you, Ilara, to the highest bidder among London's supernatural elite." The room seemed to tilt. Ilara gripped the edge of the table, breathing carefully through her nose until the nausea passed. She was going to sell me. Alive if possible, your blood if not. Theron's voice remained level, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the barely contained anger. That's why the poison, when you refused to die quickly, she decided to extract what she needed and dispose of the rest. The rest being me? Elara laughed, but it came broken. My father's wife was going to murder me and harvest my blood like I was livestock. Your father's wife is a monster wearing human skin, Mrs. Blackwell said from the doorway, where she'd apparently been listening. And she's not the only one you need to worry about. Word will spread that you're alive and protected. There will be others who come. So what do I do? Elara looked between them, hating the pleading note in her voice but unable to suppress it. Hide here forever? Let them win? You do what women in your position have always done, Theron said, leaning forward. You learn to use the weapons you have, you build alliances, and you take back what's yours. His eyes held hers, silver and intent. And you accept that you're part of a world that doesn't follow human rules anymore. By accepting this bond you keep mentioning, the bond exists whether you accept it or not. It's been there since your birth, waiting to manifest. He extended his hand across the table, palm up. But consciously acknowledging it, working with it rather than against it, that's a choice. One I won't force on you. Elara stared at his hand. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, his last coherent words before the fever took him. Stay hidden, stay safe, stay small. He'd been trying to protect her from this moment, this choice. But staying small hadn't saved her. Staying hidden hadn't kept her safe. And now, with nowhere else to turn and enemies circling, staying anything seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. What does accepting it mean? She asked. Practically speaking, it means we share more than just a magical connection. You'll be able to sense me, know when I'm near, feel what I feel in extreme circumstances. I'll be able to find you anywhere, protect you in ways that human guardians can't, lend you strength when needed. He paused. And it means my enemies become your enemies. My world becomes your world. There's no halfway, Elara. Either you're part of this, or you're running for the rest of your life. Not much of a choice. No, he agreed. It isn't. But it's the only one available. Elara thought of Constance's smile as she announced her death, of Marcus's greedy eyes, of the years she'd spent as a prisoner in her own home, waiting for a rescue that never came. Her father had tried to keep her safe by keeping her ignorant, and it had nearly gotten her killed. She wouldn't make the same mistake. Elara reached across the table and placed her hand in Theron's. The world exploded into sensation. Power rushed through her like a flood breaking through a dam. Ancient and vast and terrible, she felt Theron's presence in her mind. Not his thoughts exactly, but his essence. Centuries of existence, of battles fought and losses endured, of an isolation so profound it had carved holes in his soul. And underneath it all, a desperate, burning determination to protect what remained of the covenant, to honor the debt his father had sworn. But more than that, she felt herself reflected in his awareness, saw herself as he saw her, not a victim to be saved or a tool to be used, but something precious and powerful and utterly unique. Potential wrapped in human skin, waiting to ignite. The connection settled, becoming bearable, a constant awareness at the edge of her consciousness, like a new sense she'd never known she was missing. Elara opened eyes she didn't remember closing. Theron was watching her with an expression of mingled relief and something else, something that looked almost like wonder. "Well," Mrs. Blackwell said into the silence, "that's done then. Welcome to the Covenant, girl. May it bring you better fortune than it's brought most." "How do you feel?" Theron asked, his hand still holding hers. "Like someone rewrote my existence in a language I don't speak yet. Ilara's voice came out steady despite the chaos in her chest. But less alone. Is that normal? I wouldn't know. I've never bonded with a catalyst before. His thumb brushed against her palm, a gesture that might have been unconscious. You're the first in 3 generations to manifest strongly enough for a full bond. Lucky me. Perhaps luckier than you think. He released her hand, and she felt the loss of contact like a physical thing, though the awareness of him remained. The bond gives you access to certain abilities. Enhanced healing, increased strength and speed, resistance to most poisons and compulsions. Eventually, if you're willing to train, you'll be able to do what I did last night. Move through shadows, cross distances instantaneously. Things that will make you very difficult to capture or kill. You're talking about turning me into a weapon? I'm talking about giving you the tools to survive and reclaim what's yours. Theron stood, moving to the window. Outside, the impossible garden bloomed in defiance of the season. Your stepmother has spent the last 6 months consolidating her position. She sold off properties, dismissed loyal servants, moved assets into accounts you can't access. By the time probate is finished, there will be nothing left of your father's legacy except what she chooses to leave. Then we stop her. Ilara rose as well, surprised by the steadiness in her legs. The aches from the poison had faded, replaced by a thrumming energy that felt both foreign and right. We prove I'm alive, contest the will, expose what she's done.
In a human court with human laws?
Mrs. Blackwell shook her head. She'll have you declared insane, or claim you're an imposter, or simply arrange another accident. You can't fight her that way.
Then how?
We fight her in the world she's entered, Theron said, turning from the window. The supernatural community of London operates by its own rules, its own courts. Constance made a deal with an alchemist, which means she's acknowledged the existence of our world and submitted herself to its jurisdiction, whether she realizes it or not. We can use that. Ilara crossed her arms, thinking. She doesn't know I'm alive yet. That's an advantage. A temporary one. By now, she'll have discovered your room's empty and no body in the gardens. She'll know you escaped, and she'll be searching. Theron moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. Which means we need to move quickly. There's a gathering tonight, a salon hosted by one of London's elder vampires. The supernatural elite will be there, including the people Constance has been courting to sell you to.
You want me to walk into a room full of creatures who want to buy me?
Ilara's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. That sounds suicidal. It would be if you were human and unprotected. His eyes held hers, that silver gaze intense. But you're neither anymore. You're a catalyst bonded to an alpha vampire, which means you're under my protection. Covenant law is absolute. Anyone who harms you answers to me, and through me to the entire vampiric council. I don't know what an alpha vampire is, but I'm guessing it's important. There are 7 alpha lines in the world, Mrs. Blackwell explained. Ancient bloodlines that predate human civilization. Theron's family is one of them. His word carries weight that newer vampires can't match. If he claims you publicly, acknowledges the bond, you become untouchable. Except to my stepmother, who doesn't play by supernatural rules. Which is why we expose her there, in front of witnesses who do. Theron smiled, and there was something predatory in it. We show the community that she broke covenant law by attempting to sell a protected catalyst. The penalty for that is severe. Ilara understood what he wasn't saying. You want to execute her. I want justice for your father and protection for you. If that means executing her, then yes. He didn't look away, didn't soften the truth. She murdered your father, tried to murder you, and would have sold your body parts to the highest bidder. In any world, supernatural or otherwise, that deserves death. The girl who'd woken up yesterday morning might have recoiled from such brutal pragmatism. But that girl was gone, erased as thoroughly as the Ashford family had tried to erase Ilara's name from the registry. This new version, the one who could feel vampire power thrumming in her veins and sense the presence of an ancient predator in her mind, understood that mercy had limits. "What do I need to do?" she asked. "First, we prepare you. The salon isn't just a social gathering. It's a display of power and allegiance. You need to look the part of a catalyst who's fully awakened and unafraid." Theron glanced at Mrs. Blackwell. "I'll send word to the dressmaker, something that signals strength, not vulnerability." The old woman headed for the door, pausing to look back at Ilara. "This is your last chance to run, girl. Once you walk into that salon on Theron's arm, there's no going back to a human life. You'll be part of this world forever, with all the danger and darkness that entails." Ilara thought of her father's study, of the hours she'd spent reading his journals and papers after his death, trying to understand what had happened to him. She'd found hints, references to things she couldn't explain, but she'd dismissed them as fever dreams or metaphor. Now she understood he'd been trying to leave her a map to this world, even as he'd hoped she'd never need it. "I'm not running," Ilara said. "Not anymore." Mrs. Blackwell nodded as if she'd expected nothing less, and disappeared into the hallway. Theron moved closer, close enough that Ilara had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "The salon will test you. People will probe for weakness, try to unsettle you, assess whether you're worthy of the protection I'm claiming for you. You need to be perfect, poised, confident, untouchable. I've survived 22 years in a family that wanted me silent and invisible," Ilara said. "I know how to wear a mask." This isn't the same as navigating society tea parties. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched her chin, angling her face toward the light. "These are predators who've lived centuries. They'll smell fear, sense hesitation. You need to believe completely that you belong in that room, that you're more dangerous than any of them." "Am I?" "With training, yes. Right now," his smile held dark amusement, "right now you're a spark that could become a wildfire. But they don't need to know you're still learning to burn." The touch of his fingers against her skin sent awareness cascading through the bond. His concern, his determination, and underneath it, something that felt like admiration. She pulled back slightly, unsettled by the intimacy of sensing his emotions. "How do I control this?" she asked, gesturing vaguely between them. "The bond, I can feel you in my head." "The same way you'd learn any new skill. Practice, focus, and time." He lowered his hand, but his attention remained fixed on her. "The bond works both ways. You feel me, I feel you. Right now, you're broadcasting your emotions quite loudly." Ilara's cheeks heated. "What am I broadcasting?" "Fear, anger, determination, grief for your father, and," he paused, studying her, "curiosity about this world, about what you're becoming. That's good. Fear alone would make you prey, but curiosity with courage, that's the foundation of power." "Teach me," Ilara said impulsively. "If I have hours before this salon, teach me how to not get killed walking into it." Theron's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features before settling into something approving. "Mrs. Blackwell won't have the dress ready for several hours. We can use that time." He gestured toward the door. "Come, there's a training room below. We'll see what you're capable of." The training room turned out to be a vast underground space that seemed to defy the house's external dimensions. Stone floors, walls lined with weapons from various eras, and lighting that came from sources Ilara couldn't identify. The air smelled of earth and old stone, and something metallic she suspected was blood. "This is where you train vampires?" she asked, moving to examine a rack of swords. "Among other things. The Covenant requires that we maintain places of sanctuary and instruction." Theron shed his coat, draping it over a chair, and rolled up his sleeves. First lesson, sensing danger. The bond should warn you when threats are near, but you need to learn to interpret what you're feeling. Right now, I'm feeling like I'm in over my head. That's self-awareness, not the bond. He moved behind her, too fast to track visually. She spun, heart racing, to find him watching her from across the room. "But you turned. Some instinct told you where I went. Trust that." They worked for hours. He taught her to sense his presence even when she couldn't see him, to feel the displacement of air when he moved, to distinguish between the bond's awareness and her natural instincts. He showed her how to draw on the connection when she needed strength, how to push it away when she needed clarity. "You're a natural," Theron said, after she'd successfully dodged his approach 3 times in a row. "Most bonded catalysts take weeks to develop this level of sensitivity. Or maybe you're a good teacher." Ilara accepted the water Mrs. Blackwell brought, drinking deeply. Her body sang with energy despite the exertion. The bond was feeding her strength faster than she could deplete it. "He's a terrible teacher," Mrs. Blackwell said cheerfully. "Far too patient. Real combat won't give you time to think. You need instinct." She produced a knife from somewhere in her apron and threw it at Ilara. Ilara's hand shot up, catching the blade by its handle before conscious thought could intervene. She stared at the weapon in her grip, shocked. "See?" the old woman grinned. "Instinct. The bond knows how to keep you alive. You just need to get out of its way." "You could have warned me," Ilara protested, but she felt a fierce satisfaction. She'd caught it. Something impossible had happened, and she'd done it. "Warning defeats the purpose." Mrs. Blackwell retrieved the knife. "The dress is ready upstairs. Time to transform you from refugee to queen." The dress was a masterpiece, deep crimson silk that seemed to shift between red and black depending on the light, cut to emphasize Ilara's figure without being scandalous, with intricate black embroidery along the bodice that looked like thorns or flames. A necklace came with it, a single blood-red stone set in silver. "It's a protection talisman," Mrs. Blackwell explained as she helped Ilara dress. "Won't stop a determined attack, but it'll deflect most compulsions and minor magic. Plus, it signals to anyone with eyes that you're not some helpless human wandering into supernatural politics by accident." Ilara studied herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, confident, dangerous, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness and everything to do with power barely contained. Her dark hair had been arranged to show her face clearly, no hiding behind curls. Her eyes looked larger, more intense, reflecting the lamplight with an almost metallic sheen. "Is that normal?" She leaned closer to the mirror. "My eyes." Side effect of the bond. They'll probably settle somewhere between human and vampire. Not silver like Theron's, but not purely brown anymore either. Mrs. Blackwell adjusted the necklace. "Marks you as changed, which is what we want. You're not human anymore, girl. Time everyone knew it." A knock on the door preceded Theron's entrance. He stopped just inside the threshold, and Ilara felt his reaction through the bond. A sharp spike of approval, possession, and something warmer that made her skin flush. "You look perfect," he said quietly, "like you were made for this world." "I feel like a fraud." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "Then you're already mastering the first rule of supernatural politics." He approached, offering his arm. "Everyone here is a fraud, Ilara. We're all pretending to be more powerful, more confident, more dangerous than we are. The ones who survive are simply better actors. She took his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine fabric of his coat. And if someone sees through the act, then you make them regret it. His smile showed teeth. Ready? No, she wanted to say. I'm terrified and angry and grieving, and this is all too much, too fast. But none of those truths would help her survive the night ahead, so she lifted her chin and channeled every ounce of aristocratic hauteur her upbringing had instilled. Let's go remind London that the Ashford line isn't dead. The salon was held in a mansion in Mayfair, a location so respectable that Alara had probably attended human social events within a stone's throw of it, never knowing what gathered behind these particular doors. Theron's carriage, sleek, black, and somehow ominous despite being perfectly ordinary, delivered them to a side entrance where a footman with distinctly pointed ears waited. "Lord Theron," the footman said with a bow, "Lady Ashford, you're expected." The use of her title, the acknowledgement of her existence, felt like a victory and a threat simultaneously. Inside, the mansion was a study in contrasts. Gas lamps and candlelight illuminated rooms filled with beings who shouldn't exist. Vampires moved with predatory grace among witches whose fingers sparked with barely contained magic. Creatures that might have been fae or demons or something else entirely lounged on velvet sofas. And everywhere, humans who'd learned of this world and chosen to enter it, their eyes holding the same desperate hunger for power that Alara suspected burned in her own. Conversations died as Theron led her through the rooms. Heads turned. Eyes tracked their progress with the intensity of predators assessing prey or competition. "Lord Theron," a voice called from near the fireplace, "how delightful that you could join us, and with such interesting company." The speaker was a vampire who looked barely older than Alara, with golden hair and eyes that held millennia of cruelty. She wore diamonds like armor and smiled like a blade. "Lady Seraphina," Theron replied with a courtesy that felt like a challenge, "may I present Lady Ilara Ashford, catalyst of the Ashford line, and my bonded companion under covenant law." The room went silent, completely, utterly silent. "Your bonded companion?" Seraphina's smile sharpened. "How extraordinary! I was under the impression the last Ashford catalyst died. Just yesterday, in fact. Tragic loss." "Rumors of her death were premature," Theron said smoothly. "As you can see, she's very much alive and under my protection." "Protection?" "Yes." Seraphina approached, circling Ilara like a shark. "I wonder, though, if the girl knows what she's agreed to. A bond with an alpha isn't a small thing, Lord Theron. Some might say it's predatory to bond with someone so young, so inexperienced, so conveniently in need of rescue." Ilara felt Theron tense beside her, felt his anger spike through the bond. But she'd spent years navigating social barbs from people who wanted to diminish her. This was just a different arena. "Some might say," Ilara replied, her voice cutting through the silence like crystal, "that attempting to murder someone and sell their blood to the highest bidder is predatory. Lord Theron saved my life, which is more than my own family attempted. I chose this bond freely, Lady Seraphina. Can you say the same of the relationships you forged?" The vampire's eyes flashed with something between rage and respect. "Careful, little catalyst. You're very new to this world. Accidents happen to those who speak out of turn. Accidents happen to those who threaten my bonded companion, Theron said, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Or have you forgotten what it means to challenge an alpha's protection? Peace, Lord Theron. A new voice, male and ancient, emerged from the crowd. The speaker was an elderly vampire whose power rolled off him in waves. Lady Seraphina is merely testing.
The girl's mettle. No harm in that, surely. Lord Ambrose. Theron inclined his head with minimal deference. Testing implies consent. Lady Ashford is a guest here, not entertainment. And yet her presence raises so many fascinating questions. Ambrose moved closer, his gaze fixed on Elara with disturbing intensity. The Ashford catalyst, alive when she should be dead, bonded when her father spent decades ensuring she remained free of such entanglements. One wonders what changed, what motivated such a hasty connection. Perhaps, Elara said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The fact that my stepmother hired an alchemist to poison me and harvest my blood motivated me to seek protection from those who honor the old covenants rather than exploit them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ambrose's expression remained unchanged, but she felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. Attention focusing, predators sensing blood. A serious accusation, Ambrose said. Can you prove it? Can you prove I can't? Elara countered. I'm standing here, alive, despite being declared dead by my family last night. I carry the marks of alchemical poisoning, which any witch worth their salt could confirm. And I'm bonded to Lord Theron, which wouldn't have been possible if I were an impostor or a fraud. The bond requires genuine Ashford blood. She's clever, someone whispered, close enough for Elara to hear. Dangerous. She's desperate, another voice replied, but that can be useful. Lords and ladies, a woman's voice rang out, silencing the murmurs. Perhaps we should allow our guest to explain herself properly. The speaker was stunning, dark skin, silver-white hair, and eyes that held the depth of oceans. She wore authority like a crown, and when she moved, the crowd parted instinctively. Lady Morgana, Theron said, and Elara felt his relief through the bond. Thank you for your intervention. Lord Theron, Lady Ashford. Morgana studied Elara with unsettling intensity.
I am the arbiter of covenant law in London. If you have accusations to make regarding the violation of ancient agreements, this is the place to make them. But be certain of your claims. False accusations carry their own penalties. This was it, the moment everything either fell into place or collapsed completely. Elara stepped forward, away from Theron's protective presence, forcing herself to stand alone before the assembled supernatural elite of London. 300 years ago, my ancestor Thomas Ashford saved the life of Lord Theron's father, creating a covenant that bound our families in perpetuity. That covenant guaranteed mutual protection. The Ashford line would provide catalysts when needed, and Theron's line would protect Ashford blood from exploitation by those who would misuse our unique properties. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room, meeting eyes that glowed with power and hunger. 6 months ago, my father died under suspicious circumstances. 3 months ago, my stepmother, Constance Ashford, hired an alchemist named Silas Crow to analyze my father's journals and determine what I was. Yesterday, she attempted to poison me with a compound designed to stop my heart while preserving my blood for extraction and sale. This was it. Buzz and whispers, but Ilara pressed on. I have witnesses to the poisoning, the tonic that saved my life, and the fact that my stepmother declared me dead while I still lived. More importantly, I stand here as living proof that she violated covenant law by attempting to sell a protected catalyst to the highest bidder among this very assembly. Inflammatory accusations, Seraphina said. Where's your proof? I am the proof, Ilara shot back. Test my blood if you doubt me. Question Lady Blackwell, who administered the antidote. Summon the alchemist Crow and compel him to speak truth. I guarantee he'll confirm everything I've said. This Constance Ashford, Morgana said slowly. She's human? Yes, my lady.
And she knowingly entered into dealings with our world with full understanding of the covenant she was violating? Her alchemist would have explained the implications, Theron interjected. Crow is no amateur. He's been trafficking in supernatural affairs for 2 decades. He would have made certain she understood the risks and rewards. Morgana's expression turned cold. Then she has placed herself under our jurisdiction and must answer for her crimes. She looked at Ilara. You seek justice, Lady Ashford? I seek protection, restitution, and punishment for those who murdered my father and attempted to murder me, Ilara said. Under covenant law, I believe I'm entitled to all 3. You are. Morgana's smile held no warmth. The punishment for attempting to sell a covenant-protected catalyst is death, for the human woman and her alchemist accomplice. Does this satisfy your claim for justice? Ilara's throat tightened. This was what she'd wanted, what Theron had promised. But hearing it stated so baldly, so finally, made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her. It does, she managed. Then it shall be done. Morgana gestured, and 2 figures melted out of the shadows. Enforcers, Ilara realized. Supernatural executioners who carried out covenant law. Bring Constance Ashford and Silas Crow before the council. Tonight, if possible. We'll hold formal trial at midnight. And the estate? Ilara asked, hating how her voice shook. My inheritance? Will be returned to you in full, with reparations for the damages incurred during your stepmother's illegal tenure. Morgana's gaze softened fractionally. You're an orphan now, Lady Ashford, bonded to an alpha and entering a world that will test you daily. But you're also rich, protected by ancient law, and apparently possessed of a spine most catalysts lack. Use those advantages wisely. The arbiter turned to address the room.
Let it be known, Lady Ilara Ashford is recognized as a legitimate catalyst under covenant protection. Any who harm her answer to Lord Theron and, through him, to this council. Any who attempt to exploit her talents without proper negotiation will face immediate sanction. She is not prey, ladies and gentlemen. She is a player in our games now. Treat her accordingly. Applause rippled through the room, some genuine, some mocking, all acknowledging the shift in Ilara's status. She'd entered as a curiosity, a victim. She was leaving as something else entirely. Theron moved to her side, his presence a solid anchor. Through the bond, she felt his pride, his satisfaction, and, underneath it, genuine admiration. Well done, he murmured. You faced down the most dangerous gathering in London and came out recognized and protected. Your father would be proud. My father would be horrified I'm here at all, Ilara said, but warmth bloomed in her chest. She'd done it. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd claimed her place in a world that had tried to erase her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and carefully worded conversations. Vampires who'd considered purchasing her blood now angled for legitimate alliances. Witches offered to teach her protective magic. Even the Fae, usually dismissive of human concerns, expressed interest in future negotiations. Through it all, Ilara maintained the mask of confidence Theron had insisted she wear, channeling her fear and uncertainty into the bond where only he could sense it. He remained close, a constant supportive presence, deflecting the more aggressive overtures and steering her toward those who might genuinely help. It was near midnight when the enforcers returned, dragging a disheveled Constance Ashford and the alchemist Crow between them. Constance's eyes widened when she saw Ilara alive and dressed in finery that marked her as anything but a victim. "You," Constance breathed. How did I survive your poison?" Ilara stepped forward, allowing herself the satisfaction of watching her stepmother flinch. "I had help. From people who honor the covenants your greed led you to violate." "I don't know what lies he's filled your head with," Constance spat, jerking her chin toward Theron. "But I'm your family. I was protecting you from these monsters." "You murdered my father and tried to sell me like livestock," Ilara said quietly. "Don't insult us both by pretending it was protection." Morgana silenced Constance with a gesture. "Silas Crow, alchemist of London, you stand accused of facilitating the attempted murder and exploitation of a covenant-protected catalyst. How do you plead?" "Guilty," Crow said immediately, his voice defeated. "I told her it was madness, that the Theron line would retaliate, but she paid too well to refuse." "Coward," Constance hissed. "Constance Ashford, human resident of London, you stand accused of murdering Sir Richard Ashford through alchemical means, attempting to murder his daughter, Lady Ilara Ashford, through similar methods, and conspiracy to sell a covenant-protected catalyst to supernatural interests. How do you plead?" "I plead that you have no authority over me." Constance drew herself up with the hauteur Ilara remembered from 1,000 social engagements. "I'm a British citizen. Your supernatural court has no jurisdiction. You forfeited that protection when you entered our world knowingly and willingly," Morgana interrupted. "Covenant law is clear. Do you deny your actions?" "I deny nothing," Constance said, her eyes burning with hatred as she looked at Ilara. She was dangerous. Her father spent years hiding what she was, but I found his journals. I saw what she could become, a weapon, a source of power that could change everything. Why should it go to waste on a girl too foolish to use it? "Because it was mine," Ilara said. "My blood, my life, my choice. You had no rights." "Rights?" Constance laughed bitterly. "You speak of rights in a room full of creatures who've murdered and enslaved humans for centuries. How naive can you be?" "Perhaps," Ilara agreed, "but I'm alive, and you're about to face justice for trying to change that." Morgana raised her hand. "The evidence is clear. The accused has confessed. Under covenant law, I sentence Constance Ashford and Silas Crow to death, to be carried out immediately. Let this serve as warning to any others who would violate our ancient agreements." The execution was swift and clinical. Ilara forced herself to watch, to witness the price of her stepmother's greed and the reality of the world she'd entered. Constance died cursing her, calling her ungrateful and monstrous. Crow simply closed his eyes and accepted his fate. When it was done, when the bodies had been removed and the salon's atmosphere had shifted back to its earlier dangerous civility, Ilara found herself outside on a balcony, gulping cold night air and trying to process what had just happened. "You did well tonight," Theron said, appearing beside her with his characteristic silence. "Better than well. You were magnificent." "I just watched 2 people die because of me." Ilara gripped the balcony railing. "I know they deserved it, that they would have killed me without hesitation, but it's still death, and you're still human enough to feel the weight of it. He moved closer, his shoulder brushing hers. That's good, Ilara. The day you stop feeling that weight is the day you become the monster Constance accused you of being. They stood in silence, watching London sprawl beneath them, a city that held two worlds, one visible, one hidden, both filled with people trying to survive and hungry for power. "What happens now?" Ilara asked finally. "Now you reclaim your estate, mourn your father properly, and begin learning how to wield the power you've inherited." Theron turned to face her fully. "The bond is only the beginning. You have abilities that haven't fully manifested yet, potential that will take years to develop. You'll need training, protection, and allies. And you'll provide all that? That's what the bond means. I protect you, you trust me. We build something stronger together than either of us could manage alone." His hand lifted, hesitating before touching her cheek with surprising gentleness. "Your father tried to spare you this life. I can't say whether that was wisdom or folly, but you're here now, and you've proven you can survive it. The question is whether you want to." Ilara considered the question seriously. The world she'd known was gone. Her father dead, her stepmother executed, her place in human society erased by the events of the past day. But in exchange, she'd gained something she'd never had before: agency, power, a choice in her own destiny. "I want to survive," she said finally, "and more than that, I want to thrive. I want to become someone my father would have been proud of, even if the path I'm taking isn't one he would have chosen for me. Then we'll make that happen." Theron's smile was small but genuine, transforming his face from merely beautiful to something that made her chest tighten. "Welcome to your new life, Lady Ashford. I suspect it's going to be extraordinary." 6 months transformed Ilara from a girl playing at power to someone who wielded it with confidence born of hard-won experience. The Ashford estate had been returned to her control, along with reparations that made her one of the wealthier members of London's supernatural community. She'd used that wealth strategically, building alliances and establishing herself as a catalyst who was valuable but untouchable, who could be negotiated with but never exploited. The training had been brutal. Theron was a relentless teacher, pushing her to master abilities she hadn't known existed. She could move through shadows now, crossing distances instantaneously. She could sense supernatural beings from blocks away, distinguish between different types of magic, and shield her mind from most forms of compulsion. Her blood, when properly processed, could heal wounds that would kill most creatures, and Shed had learned to use that as leverage in negotiations. But more than skills, Shed learned the politics of the hidden world. She understood the delicate balance between vampire clans, the ancient feuds between witches and fae, the ways that humans like her father's alchemist played dangerous games for scraps of power. She'd made friends and enemies, earned respect and resentment, and carved out a space for herself that felt earned rather than inherited. Through it all, the bond with Theron had deepened. What had started as necessity had become something more complex, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared danger, and an understanding that went beyond words. She felt him constantly at the edge of her awareness, a steady presence that had become as natural as breathing. Tonight, they stood in the council chambers where Morgana presided over covenant disputes, a complicated case involving territorial rights between vampire clans, and Ilara had been called as a neutral catalyst to verify certain blood claims. It was tedious work, but it paid well and cemented her reputation as impartial and reliable. "Lady Ashford's findings are accepted," Morgana declared after Ilara had presented her analysis. "The territorial claim is valid. This council finds in favor of Lord Ravencroft." Applause and grumbling in equal measure. Ilara gathered her materials, ready to leave, when Morgana gestured for her to remain.